An arrogant billionaire attacked a waitress, not knowing she was pregnant. The twist is unbelievable. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories where one silent choice changes everything pull you in, stay glued, click like and hit subscribe, because this one doesn't let go. The morning alarm screamed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Sarah Chen had set it. She'd learned long ago that anticipating the alarm by those precious minutes made the day feel slightly less like drowning. In the darkness of her studio apartment, if you could call a converted storage space in Queens an apartment, she moved through her routine with the efficiency of someone who'd measured every second against survival. Cold water on her face. Hair tied back in the same tight bun she'd worn for 3 years at the Meridian Club, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant where a single entree cost more than her weekly groceries. The navy uniform dress hung on the back of her bathroom door, pressed despite the wrinkles that seemed to grow back overnight like weeds. She was 28 but felt 40, her youth spent like coins dropped through her fingers, college debt, her mother's medical bills before the cancer one, rent that climbed while her wages stayed frozen. The subway ride into Manhattan was a meditation in invisibility. Sarah had perfected the art of making herself small, eyes down, shoulders curved inward. She'd learned that beauty, even the modest kind she possessed with her delicate features and dark eyes, attracted the wrong kind of attention when you were alone and the city was still dark. She thought about the test she needed to take, not the GRE she'd been planning for years but the other one. The one sitting in her bathroom drawer, still in its box, still a question she was too terrified to answer. Her period was late. 17 days late. And she knew, felt it in a way that transcended logic, that Micah, the chef she'd spent one desperate night with 2 months ago seeking comfort after a particularly brutal shift, had left more than memories. He'd transferred to a restaurant in Los Angeles the next week. She had his number. She'd never called. What would she say? You left your DNA behind? The Meridian Club smelled like money, a peculiar scent of imported orchids, aged wood, and the particular cologne wealthy men wore that cost more than her monthly rent. Sarah moved through the morning prep with practiced precision, her body on autopilot while her mind spiraled through impossible math. How much money she'd need, how impossible that amount was, how thoroughly trapped she'd become. Table 12 is yours today, Gerald, the floor manager, announced during the pre-service briefing. His expression carried a warning. Marcus Thornfield. Billionaire, short temper, shorter patience. Smile, don't speak unless spoken to, and for God's sake, don't make mistakes. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she polished the already gleaming silverware at table 12. She'd served hundreds of wealthy men. They blurred together, same entitled expectations, same way of looking through her as if she were atmospheric, necessary but unworthy of actual notice. She told herself this would be no different. She was wrong. Marcus Thornfield woke at 5 a.m. in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the city spreading below him like a kingdom he'd conquered through sheer ruthless will. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan in its pre-dawn vulnerability, and Marcus felt nothing but satisfaction. He'd built Thornfield Ventures from the smoking ruins of his father's betrayal, the company stolen by a trusted partner, his family's name dragged through bankruptcy courts, his mother's tears in the darkness of their foreclosed home. 15 years later, Marcus was worth $3.2 billion and rising. He'd learned the essential truth. Trust no one, show no weakness, and money was the only power that mattered. People were transactions. Emotions were liabilities. Kindness was for people who couldn't afford cruelty. His morning routine was military precise. 60 minutes of exercise with his personal trainer, a breakfast prepared by his private chef consisting of exactly 42 grams of protein and 25 grams of complex carbohydrates, then the armor, Tom Ford suit, Patek Philippe watch, Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people earned in a month. Each piece was a statement. I won. You lost. Remember your place. The morning had already gone wrong. The Tokyo merger, 6 months of negotiation, $200 million on the table, was falling apart because some middle manager had gotten squeamish about the layoffs Marcus's restructuring required. 1,500 jobs. Marcus felt nothing about the number. They were inefficiencies being corrected, excess being trimmed. Business wasn't personal. His phone buzzed incessantly. His lawyer, his CFO, his publicist managing the optics of a lawsuit from a former employee claiming workplace harassment. Another problem money would eliminate. Marcus dictated responses between sets of weights, each message a blade cutting through other people's concerns with surgical indifference. By 8:30 a.m., when his driver pulled up to the Meridian Club for his standing breakfast meeting, Marcus was already exhausted by other people's incompetence. The restaurant was his refuge, A place where his money ensured perfection, where staff moved with invisible efficiency, where everything bent to his will. His guest was late. Senator Bradley, whose vote Marcus had purchased through carefully legal campaign contributions, was stuck in traffic. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd arrived on time. Everyone else should too. Time was money, and wasting his time was theft. He ordered coffee, specific temperature, specific roast, specific preparation, and opened his laptop to fire off another series of emails designed to make grown men apologize. The power was intoxicating. Every day was a war he was winning. He didn't notice the waitress who delivered his coffee with trembling hands. Didn't see the exhaustion in her eyes or the way she'd carefully centered the cup exactly where his hand would reach it. Sarah was furniture to him. Functional. Forgettable. Nothing. He didn't know that in approximately 4 minutes, his hand would collide with that carefully placed cup, that boiling coffee would splash across his $7,000 laptop, and that the woman he'd blame would be carrying a secret that would make his next action unforgivable. He didn't know that the man he was about to become in his rage would be someone he couldn't unbuy, unlawyer, or undo. The collision was coming. Neither of them saw it. But it would change everything. This is just the beginning of a story that will challenge everything you think about power, redemption, and the price of cruelty. Like this video if you're already hooked, comment below whether you think people can truly change, and subscribe so you don't miss how this shocking confrontation unfolds. Trust me, what happens next will leave you breathless. The coffee had been perfect, 198 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly as specified. Sarah had triple-checked before placing it precisely 3 inches from the edge of the table, handle angled at 45 degrees for easy reach. She'd served thousands of cups exactly this way. Her hands hadn't even shaken this time, despite the exhaustion singing through her bones. She was turning away when it happened. Marcus's hands swept out in a gesture of frustration during a phone call. Some subordinate was explaining why quarterly projections were off by 0.1%, and his knuckles caught the rim of the cup. The coffee arced through the air in slow motion, Sarah's trained reflexes already reaching to catch what couldn't be caught. The liquid hit Marcus's open laptop with a hiss, seeping between keys, the screen flickering once before dying completely. Time crystallized into a single moment of perfect, terrible silence. Sarah's first words were automatic. "I'm so sorry, sir." "Let me." "You stupid, clumsy bitch." The words were ice and venom, delivered in a voice that reduced Sarah to less than human in 3 seconds. Marcus stood, coffee dripping from his sleeve, his face contorted into something beyond anger, a rage so pure it was almost transcendent. Every failure of his morning, every frustration of his life, every ounce of the control he worshipped and had just lost, channeled into this moment. "Do you have any idea what you've just destroyed?" His voice was rising, drawing attention from other tables. "That laptop contains 6 months of proprietary data for a $200 million merger. Do you even comprehend those numbers, or is your education limited to carrying plates?" Sarah's apology died on her lips. She could feel every eye in the restaurant turning toward them, could see Gerald rushing over with a manager's panic smile already fixed in place. Her face burned with humiliation that felt like acid in her veins. "Sir, I'll personally insure," Gerald began. "You'll insure nothing," Marcus snarled. "I want her fired. Now. Before she destroys something else with her incompetence." Something shifted in Sarah's chest. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was the secret growing inside her that she hadn't confirmed but somehow knew. Maybe it was 3 years of swallowing dignity for a paycheck that barely kept her alive. Whatever it was, it straightened her spine. "You knocked the coffee over yourself," she said quietly. The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief, as if furniture had suddenly spoken. "Excuse me?" "I placed the coffee at a safe distance. You hit it with your hand during your phone call. I'm sorry your computer was damaged, but I didn't knock it over." "You did." The slap came before anyone could process what was happening. Marcus's palm connected with Sarah's cheek with a crack that echoed off the mahogany walls. The force snapped her head to the side, the sting spreading across her face like fire. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and pain. For a moment no one moved. The wealthy patrons sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Gerald made a strangled sound. A woman gasped. Someone's phone was already recording, the red light a tiny witness to everything. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain, though her face throbbed, but from the sheer volcanic rage and humiliation boiling inside her. Her other hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, a protective gesture for something she wasn't even sure existed yet. Something primal and fierce rose up through the shock. "You hit me," she whispered, and then louder, her voice cracking. "You hit me." Marcus seemed to wake from whatever demon had possessed him. His hand was still raised, his palms stinging. Around him he registered the phones, the staring faces, the social equation rapidly recalculating. His lawyer's voice echoed in his head from a previous crisis. "Never physical. Physical can't be managed." "She was hysterical," he said, his voice automatically shifting into justification mode. "She became aggressive. I was defending." "I'm a waitress who told you the truth about spilling your own coffee," Sarah cut him off, her voice steadier now, though tears streamed down her face. "And you hit me. Everyone saw you. You can't buy your way out of what everyone just saw." Gerald was pulling Sarah backward, murmuring apologies to Marcus, promising to handle the situation, but Sarah shook him off. She met Marcus's eyes, those cold blue eyes that looked at her like she was nothing, and in that moment she saw something she didn't expect. Fear. Not of her. Of consequences. Of the phone's recording, of the witnesses, of something his money might not be able to erase. "I quit," Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. "You can't fire someone who quits. And you can't make me disappear." She turned and walked through the restaurant, her cheek blazing, her heart hammering, her hands trembling so violently she had to clench them into fists. Behind her, she could hear Gerald apologizing profusely to Marcus, could hear Marcus's lawyer's number being demanded, could hear the machinery of power and money beginning to grind into motion to contain the damage. She made it to the employee locker room before her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the bench, her whole body shaking, the adrenaline leaving her system and taking all her strength with it. The tears came in wrenching sobs, for her job, for her dignity, for the impossible situation she was in, for the baby she was now certain she carried and had just failed to protect from violence. Her phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. "We need to talk. Mr. Thornfield is willing to be generous in exchange for your discretion." Sarah's hand moved to her stomach again. 3 weeks pregnant, give or take. The father gone to California. No job. No savings. A billionaire who just struck her and now wanted to buy her silence. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror above the lockers. Her cheek was already swelling, a red handprint emerging like a brand. Evidence. Proof. The thing Marcus Thornfield feared. For the first time in years, Sarah Chen felt something more powerful than fear. She felt dangerous. Outside the locker room, Marcus was already on the phone with his crisis management team, his voice tight and controlled, explaining the incident that needed to be managed. He could feel his heart racing beneath his composed exterior, could feel something unfamiliar crawling through his veins. Not quite guilt. Not yet. But the first tremor of understanding that he'd crossed a line that money might not be able to uncross. The video was already uploading to social media. By noon it would have 100,000 views. By evening 1 million. The world was about to have an opinion about Marcus Thornfield. And in a bathroom stall, Sarah Chen was taking a pregnancy test, her hands shaking, her cheek throbbing, her entire life balanced on a plastic stick that would take 3 minutes to change everything. The collision had happened. The shockwave was just beginning. I can barely process what just happened. This story is about to take turns you will not see coming. Like this video if your heart is racing right now, comment your reaction to what Marcus just did, and make sure you're subscribed because what happens next will shake you to your core. This is far from over. The test was positive. 2 pink lines, undeniable and terrifying, appearing like a verdict in the harsh fluorescent light of the Meridian Club's employee bathroom. Sarah sat on the toilet lid for 20 minutes after, staring at the plastic stick as if it might change its mind. 3 weeks and 4 days pregnant, by her calculation. A cluster of cells dividing inside her, unaware that it had just been struck by a billionaire's hand through the fragile wall of her body. The thought made her nauseous in a way that had nothing to do with morning sickness. She finally emerged to find Gerald waiting outside with an expression that mixed pity and calculation in equal measure. In his hand was an envelope, thick, cream-colored, expensive paper. Marcus Thornfield's lawyer worked fast. "Sarah, let's talk somewhere private," Gerald said, his voice dripping with a kindness that felt like oil on water. "How much?" she asked flatly. Gerald blinked. "I'm sorry? How much is in the envelope? How much is my silence and my bruised face worth to Marcus Thornfield?" Gerald's expression shifted, a flicker of respect before the manager's mask returned. $50,000. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement stating that this was an accident, that you understand Mr. Thornfield meant no harm, and that you won't discuss the incident with anyone, including media or law enforcement. $50,000. It might as well have been 50 million or 50 cents, both equally impossible to comprehend. Sarah thought about her student loans, $87,000 and climbing with interest, her rent, $1,400 for a converted storage closet, the prenatal care she'd need, no insurance, the impossibility of raising a child alone in New York City. She thought about the video she'd seen someone taking. The proof. "I need to think about it," she heard herself say. Gerald's eyes hardened slightly. "Sarah, I'd advise you not to wait too long. Mr. Thornfield is being incredibly generous, given that this was essentially a misunderstanding. If you refuse and try to pursue other avenues, his legal team is formidable. They've made problems much larger than this disappear." The threat was wrapped in concern, but it was still a threat. Sarah felt cold rage crystallize in her chest. "I said I need to think about it," she repeated, and walked past him out into the Manhattan morning. Marcus's penthouse had become a war room. His lawyer, Richard Chen, no relation to Sarah, though the coincidence made Marcus uncomfortable, sat across from him with a tablet displaying social media analytics. The video had gone viral. 1.2 million views in 6 hours, climbing exponentially. "Billionaire assaults waitress over coffee" was trending on Twitter. TikTok had created a hashtag. Reddit was doxing him with enthusiastic fury. His company's stock had dropped 3 points. "We can manage this," Richard said with the confidence of a man who'd managed worse. "The NDA is airtight. If she signs, she can't discuss it, and we can pivot the narrative to resolved misunderstanding between parties. I've already got our PR firm drafting statements about your commitment to workplace safety and respect." "What if she doesn't sign?" Marcus asked. Richard smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "Then we make her wish she had. Her employment history shows 3 terminated positions. We can build a narrative around instability. She's got debt, no family support system. A single woman facing a billionaire's legal team? She'll crumble. They always do." Marcus looked out over Central Park. He could see joggers, dog walkers, people living their small lives unaware that his was imploding. He tried to feel the satisfaction he usually felt in these situations. The thrill of deploying power, of watching his money and resources crush opposition. But something felt different. He kept seeing her eyes. Not the fear he'd expected and felt entitled to, but something else. Defiance. Dignity. As if she'd looked at him and found him lacking. His phone rang. His mother. He sent it to voicemail, as he had for the past 6 months since she'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and started saying uncomfortable things about the man he'd become, and what happens to souls that harden completely. He didn't need a dying woman's guilt. He needed control. "Do whatever it takes," Marcus told Richard. "I want this gone." Sarah sat in a free legal clinic in Brooklyn, across from a young attorney named Jennifer Martinez who looked barely older than Sarah herself. She'd found the clinic through a Google search, her hands shaking as she typed assault, and billionaire, and help. Jennifer listened to the story, watched the viral video on her phone, and examined the photos Sarah had taken of her bruised cheek. When Sarah mentioned the pregnancy, Jennifer's expression shifted from professional sympathy to something sharper. "You're pregnant," Jennifer repeated. "And he struck you with enough force to leave bruising." "I didn't know yet when it happened. But yes, the test was positive today." Jennifer leaned back, fingers steepled. "Sarah, this changes the legal landscape significantly. Assault is already serious. Assault on a pregnant woman, even if he didn't know, carries additional weight. In New York, that could be considered reckless endangerment of an unborn child, depending on how aggressive we want it to be." "I don't want to be aggressive," Sarah said quickly. I don't know what I want. Justice. That sounds naive. Money? That makes me feel dirty. For him to face consequences? He's a billionaire. That's probably impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Jennifer said. "But you need to understand what you're up against. Thornfield has unlimited resources. If you refuse the NDA and push forward with legal action, criminal or civil, he will destroy you. He'll dig into every corner of your life. Every mistake, every bad boyfriend, every overdue bill. He'll paint you as unstable, opportunistic, a gold digger who spilled coffee deliberately to set him up." Sarah felt sick. Can he win with that strategy? He doesn't need to win. He just needs to make you lose. Make you spend money you don't have on lawyers. Make you spend years in depositions. Make the stress cost you your pregnancy or your health or your sanity. He can afford to drag this out forever. Can you? The answer was obvious. Sarah looked down at her hands, at the calluses from years of carrying plates, at the cheap watch her mother had given her before she died. She thought about the $50,000. It could pay off a quarter of her student loans, cover prenatal care, give her a cushion while she found another job. All she had to do was sign away her truth. "What would you do?" Sarah asked quietly. Jennifer was silent for a long moment. "Honestly, I want to fight. But I'm not carrying a child and facing eviction. There's no wrong answer here, Sarah. There's just the answer you can live with." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his windows watching the city lights, and for the first time in 15 years he called his mother back. "Marcus," she answered, her voice weak but alert. "I was beginning to think you'd disappeared. I'm sorry. Work has been." "I saw the video," she interrupted. The whole world saw the video. Silence stretched between them like a canyon. "Mom, it was an accident." She was hysterical. "I barely touched. Don't lie to me and don't lie to yourself. I raised you better than that, even if you've forgotten." Her voice was soft but cut like wire. "I'm dying, Marcus. I don't have time for your justifications. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I want the truth. When you struck that young woman, who were you punishing? Or every person who ever made you feel powerless?" Marcus's throat tightened. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I understand that you've become the thing you hate most. Your father's business partner, the man who betrayed us, he was powerful too. He had money and lawyers and the ability to destroy people. And he did it because he could. Because people were just obstacles to him. Is that who you are now? Is that the man I'm going to have to think about after I'm gone? That's not fair. Death makes everything fair, sweetheart. Just strips away all the bullshit. And here's what I see from where I'm standing. You hurt someone weaker than you because you could. And now you're trying to pay her to forget it happened. That's not strength. That's cowardice." The line went dead. His mother had hung up. Marcus stood in the dark, his reflection a ghost in the glass, and felt something crack in his chest that money had been holding together for years. Somewhere in Queens, Sarah was making a decision. Somewhere in a law office, Richard was preparing weapons. Somewhere between them, a collision was building toward its second impact. The resistance was crumbling. The tension was rising. And neither of them knew yet that the universe was about to force them back together in a way neither could escape. The pressure is building, and I am here for it. This story is about to take a turn that will challenge everything. Like this video if you're emotionally invested, comment whether Sarah should take the money or fight, and subscribe so you're here when these two collide again. You won't want to miss what happens next. The deposition room was designed to intimidate, all dark wood and leather, with windows overlooking Manhattan from the 47th floor of Thornfield Ventures' legal headquarters. Sarah sat at the massive table feeling like a child in a grown-up's chair. Her public defender, Jennifer, had connected her with a non-profit legal aid organization, looking equally overwhelmed beside her. Sarah had refused the NDA. The decision had cost her 3 nights of sleep and approximately 1,000 moments of doubt, but when she tried to imagine signing her name to a lie, she'd felt the baby move inside her, or imagined it anyway, too early for real movement but the idea of movement, and couldn't do it. She'd filed a police report. Assault charges were pending. A civil suit was being prepared. And Marcus Thornfield's legal team had responded by demanding her deposition. The first step in what Richard Chen promised would be comprehensive litigation that will expose every corner of Ms. Chen's life to scrutiny. Marcus wasn't supposed to be here. Depositions were typically handled by lawyers. But he'd insisted, telling Richard he wanted to face this directly. The truth, which Marcus barely admitted to himself, was that he couldn't stop thinking about her. About her eyes. About his mother's last words before she'd stopped answering his calls. "You hurt someone weaker than you because you could." When Sarah walked into the conference room, 7 months visibly pregnant now, Marcus felt the world tilt. Richard had mentioned the pregnancy in passing, a complicating factor in the legal strategy. But knowing it abstractly and seeing her, exhausted and defiant, her hand unconsciously protective over the swell of her belly, were entirely different things. Sarah's eyes found his across the room and something electric passed between them. Not attraction. Something more complicated. Recognition of how fundamentally they'd changed each other's lives in a moment of violence. "Mr. Thornfield," her lawyer said tightly, "you're not required to be present for—" "I want to be here," Marcus said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. The deposition lasted 4 hours. Richard was surgical in his questions, designed to paint Sarah as unstable, opportunistic, financially desperate. He asked about her terminated positions. "About the baby's father, absent," Sarah answered quietly. About her debts, her mental health, her motives. Marcus watched her answer each question with a dignity that made him feel progressively smaller. She didn't deflect or embellish. When asked directly if she deliberately spilled the coffee to create a situation she could exploit, she simply said, "I was a waitress trying to serve coffee perfectly so I wouldn't lose my job. You can believe that or not. I know what happened." During a break, Marcus found himself alone with her in the hallway. His security had stepped away, her lawyer was making calls. It was the first time they'd been face to face without witnesses since the restaurant. "How far along are you?" Marcus asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. Sarah's hand moved to her stomach protectively. 7 months. "It's mine, isn't it? The lawsuit you're going to claim?" "It's not yours," Sarah cut him off, her voice sharp. "I was pregnant before you touched me. The baby's father is in California and doesn't know. I haven't decided if I'll tell him. None of which is your business." Marcus felt an unexpected flood of relief, followed immediately by shame at his own assumption. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Assumed I was trying to trap you? Yeah. You shouldn't have." Sarah's eyes were hard. "That's your problem, Mr. Thornfield? You think everyone wants something from you. That every interaction is a transaction. That people like me only exist in relation to people like you. That's not," Marcus started, then stopped. "Because it was true. Entirely, painfully true. Do you want to know the worst part?" Sarah continued, her voice softer now but no less cutting. "I actually feel sorry for you. Because I'm broke and pregnant and unemployed and facing an army of your lawyers, and I still have something you don't. I can look at myself in the mirror and know who I am." "Can you?" Before Marcus could respond, her lawyer returned, and Sarah was led back into the deposition room. Marcus stood in the hallway, his reflection in the building's glass wall showing him a man in a $5,000 suit who couldn't answer a simple question. The medical emergency happened 3 days later. Sarah collapsed at the free clinic where she'd been receiving prenatal care. Stress-induced complications, the doctors said. Preeclampsia. Dangerously high blood pressure. The baby was measuring small. She needed bed rest, reduced stress, and monitoring that her non-existent insurance couldn't cover. Jennifer called Marcus's office directly, bypassing Richard. "Your legal warfare is literally putting her life at risk. She's in the hospital. Her blood pressure is stroke level. If something happens to her or that baby, your optics problem becomes a manslaughter problem." Marcus stood in his office, the phone cold against his ear. "Which hospital? Why? Which hospital, Jennifer? And why you Langone? But if you're planning some kind of legal ambush?" Marcus hung up. 20 minutes later, he was in his car. 30 minutes after that, he was lying to the hospital staff that he was the baby's father to get access to her room. Sarah was asleep when he entered, her face pale against white pillows, an IV in her arm, monitors tracking her and the baby's heartbeats in sterile beeps. She looked impossibly young and unbearably fragile. Marcus stood at the foot of her bed and felt something inside him crack completely open. This was his fault. Not the pregnancy, not her poverty, not the absent father, but this, right now, this moment of her body failing under the stress he'd caused with his cruelty and his lawyers and his need to win at any cost. He was staring at the medical bill on her bedside table, $17,000 and climbing, when Sarah's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then, "Are you here to finish the job?" Sarah asked, her voice rough with exhaustion. "I'm here too." Marcus stopped. "Why was he here?" "I heard about the hospital. I wanted to make sure you were alive? Convenient for your legal case?" She tried to sit up, winced, gave up. "You can leave. Tell your lawyers I'm not dead yet so they can keep deposing me." "I'm dropping the case," Marcus said. The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. Sarah stared. "What? All of it? The litigation, the countersuit, the NDA requirement. I'm dropping it. And I'm paying your medical bills." "Why?" Her voice was sharp with suspicion. "What's the catch? What do I have to sign?" "Nothing. No catch. No paperwork." Marcus moved closer, pulled up a chair. "Sarah, He stopped, the words foreign and difficult. "I heard you. I've been hurting you for 7 months by trying to make you the villain in a story where I'm the only villain. My lawyers were right, I could probably win or at least make you lose. But my mother was right too. Winning this way doesn't make me powerful. It makes me cruel." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Your mother? She died 2 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. The last conversation we had, she asked me if I'd become the man who destroyed our family, or if there was still something decent left. Marcus's voice cracked. I've been asking myself that question every day since. And watching you in that deposition, seeing you here now. I don't want to be that man anymore. I don't know if I can change, but I want to try. Silence filled the room except for the steady beep of the monitors. Sarah's hand rested on her stomach, and Marcus could see the baby moving beneath her hospital gown. A roll, a kick, life asserting itself. I'm not going to forgive you, Sarah said finally. Not now. Maybe not ever. I know. And if you're expecting me to suddenly see the good in you or fall for some redemption fantasy, that's not happening. You hit me. You tried to destroy me. Those aren't things that go away because you feel guilty. I know, Marcus repeated. But. Sarah exhaled shakily. The medical bills would help. And if you're serious about dropping the legal case, that would help more. I just want to have this baby in peace and figure out how to survive. That's all I've ever wanted. Marcus nodded. What's the baby? Do you know? A ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's face. Girl. I'm having a girl. Have you picked a name? Elena. After my mother. Sarah's expression softened. She would have loved being a grandmother. She would have figured out how to make this work. I don't know how, but she would have. Marcus thought about his own mother, about the disappointment in her eyes, about dying while believing her son had become a monster. My mother's name was Grace, he said quietly. She believed people could be better than their worst moments. I'm starting to think she was right. Sarah stared at him. You want me, the woman you assaulted and tried to destroy with lawyers, to run your charitable foundation? You understand what they need. You've lived it. And you have something I never had, the ability to see people as people, not transactions. Marcus's expression was earnest. I know it sounds insane. I know you have every reason to say no. But you asked me how I change. Maybe this is how. By putting power in the hands of someone who'll use it better than I did. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Elena kicked again, a tiny foot pressing against the wall of Sarah's abdomen as if casting her vote. I need to think about it, Sarah said finally. This isn't a decision I can make at 3 a.m. in a cemetery while massively pregnant. Fair enough. Marcus stood, offering his hand to help her up. She took it and he pulled her carefully to her feet. For a moment they stood face to face, close enough that Sarah could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the genuine remorse that had eroded his earlier arrogance into something more human. I need to get home, Sarah said. This baby doesn't care about my emotional revelations, she cares about whether her mother is horizontal. Let me drive you, Marcus offered. Sarah almost refused on principle, but fatigue won. Fine. But no more cemetery confessions. I have a maximum capacity for billionaire vulnerability. The drive back to Queens was quiet, the city sliding from darkness to dawn around them. When Marcus pulled up outside her building, Sarah didn't immediately get out. Marcus, she said. Yeah. Your mother, I think she'd be proud you're trying. That has to count for something. Marcus's eyes shone with tears he didn't let fall. Thank you for coming tonight. You didn't have to. I know. Sarah opened the door then paused. The foundation thing? Ask me again after Elena's born. When I'm less pregnant and more rational. Deal? Marcus said. Sarah made it up the 3 flights to her apartment, collapsed onto her bed, and felt Elena settle into a comfortable position. Her daughter. Her responsibility. Her reason to believe that people could start over, could be better than their worst moments, could choose differently. She thought about Marcus, about his tears at his mother's grave, about his hand on her stomach feeling Elena kick. She thought about power and accountability and the long road from hurting someone to healing what you've broken. The dawn light was filling her small apartment, touching the second-hand crib she'd assembled, the tiny clothes she'd washed and folded. A new life was coming. And maybe, in its own way, a new life had already begun. One where cruelty could be confronted, where power could be redistributed, where people could surprise you by choosing to be better. 3 weeks later, Sarah gave birth to Elena Grace Chen, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, furiously alive. Marcus sent flowers with a note. Welcome to the world, Elena. Your mother is the strongest person I've ever met. 6 months after that, Sarah accepted the position running the Grace Elizabeth Foundation. Not because she'd forgiven Marcus, but because she believed in the work. Because 1,500 people laid off in Tokyo needed someone to see them as humans, not numbers. Because single mothers needed healthcare. Because cruelty should be transformed into kindness whenever possible. Marcus showed up to work 3 days a week at the foundation, doing unglamorous work, grant reviews, donor calls, budget meetings. Not as the powerful CEO, but as someone learning to use his resources for something other than winning. He and Sarah developed a careful relationship, not friendship exactly but something more honest. Two people bound by violence who chose to build something better from the wreckage. The viral video never went away, it lived online forever, a permanent record of Marcus's worst moment. But gradually new videos appeared alongside it. Marcus at a fundraiser for single mothers. Sarah speaking on a panel about workplace rights. The Grace Elizabeth Foundation opening its 10th regional office. They didn't become lovers. They didn't become best friends. But they became partners in the most important work either had done, the work of proving that people can choose differently, that accountability matters, and that sometimes the collision that breaks you can also remake you into something more honest and more whole. Elena grew up knowing the story, her mother told her age-appropriately over years. Not to make her hate Marcus but to teach her that adults make mistakes, that power can be misused, that accountability is crucial, and that people are capable of choosing better. And sometimes when Sarah watched Marcus reading to Elena or helping her with science projects, she'd remember the man who'd struck her and feel the impossible complexity of human beings who contain both cruelty and kindness, both violence and vulnerability. She never forgot what he'd done. But she learned to hold space for who he was trying to become. And in that space something unexpected grew, not forgiveness exactly but something richer. Understanding. Grace. The possibility that we're all works in progress, and the story doesn't end with our worst moment unless we choose to stop writing. The coffee stain on Marcus's ruined laptop was long gone. But its ripples spread outward still, in Elena's laughter, in the foundation's work, in two lives irrevocably changed by a single violent moment and the long, difficult choice to transform it into something that mattered. I'm absolutely wrecked by this story and I hope you are too. This is what it means to grapple with real accountability, real change, and the complicated beauty of human beings trying to be better. Like this video if this story moved you, comment your thoughts on redemption and second chances, and subscribe for more stories that will challenge your heart and stay with you long after they end. Thank you for being here for this journey. You matter and your time matters. I'll see you in the next story.